Right. For day, we are live.
Half a day, Maget.
Right. Hungan. Okay. Everything is working now. But so total Pogo Biba. All right. Si Zeus Masi Paripasensun Minzu. All right. Let me just make sure everything is on the go. Hungan. Gaigigi Instagram. Hungan. Gaigigi. Gaigigi Facebook Lokwi. Maulek. Gaigigi YouTube. All right. Nigi. Maulek. Gaigigi YouTube. All right, Enigi. All right. Half a day todos hamzu bueno hudzung. Estigi I nuevo episode Fanachu host midzu tatlo si Michael Luhan Bavakwa. And we're a little bit early. I'm taking my lunch break here a little bit early to have a very special guest with us, Senadora Sabina Flores Perez. For those of you who pay attention to politics here on Guam, has been one of a member of the Guam legislature who has been one of the most steadfast sort of defenders of the environment, of Chamorro rights, land rights, and so on. And even prior to that, she has been somebody who has been championing these issues in the community. I've known Sabina esta más que 20 años, more than 20 years now that I have known Sabina. Before she was a senator, I remember Sabina as a community advocate fighting for water rights here on Guam. And then we even had the pleasure of traveling to the United Nations and testifying. And so it is a pleasure to have her here on this Fanachu episode because she has been hard at work on a number of critical issues that affect our island. And if you are somebody who is on social media way too much like me, then it's easy to get caught up in a lot of the noise and not pay attention to some of the more fundamental issues. Some of you might not know what a programmatic agreement is. Some of you might know about the high cost of living on the island, but might not think about how the military affects that high cost of living, how their housing affects our cost of living. Some of you might have heard deep sea mining, might not think, what does deep sea mining have to do with anything? Is that like a James Cameron movie? Is that the new Avatar movie? You may not know what deep sea mining refers to. This may have everything to do with the sustainability, with the economic viability, with the ability to drink our water, to eat the fish that come out of our waters. Deep sea mining is a huge issue. These are all critical issues. And Senator Sabina has been at the forefront of all of these issues lately. And so we're going to get updates from her about that. And so, Senadora Sidzus Masi, Purifinatotmu, para este episode Fanachu. So glad to have you here for this Fanachu episode.
Thank you, Masi, Maget, for giving me this opportunity to speak to the people regarding a very important issue. Of course, all those issues are critical and they're coming to a head. And we, yes, you're right. I've been working hard on those issues, but there's one issue that really has escaped attention, and it's something that we can take action on here on our very island, and that is a draft 2025 programmatic agreement that will supersede and replace a 2008 programmatic agreement for undertakings by the Navy on the island of Guam. And just to give a little backdrop, there's overwhelming evidence that these programmatic agreements, have been detrimental, have not lived up to its what it's supposed to do, which is to preserve our historic sites. And really, the title of this talk has been "Cultural Consent is Not Optional," right? And so we cannot continue with the status quo. Status quo is not an option when it comes to cultural preservation, when it comes to protections of our environment. And that's what these agreements, these laws that's how they've been implemented. The foundational law is the National Historic Preservation Act when it comes to historic preservation. Of course, we have the National Environmental Policy Act, which oversees all environmental harms. And that too, we have fallen short as far as protection of our environment, protection of our historic sites through these consultative processes for many reasons, right? Of course, the obvious reason is that we are a territory. We lack that political clout. But if I can go into this draft programmatic agreement and talk a little bit more of the details about it. And so the problems with this agreement is that it expands the scope. So although it says it's going to supersede the 2008 agreement, it underhandedly expands the scope of it to include all future land acquisitions by the Department of Defense. I mean, that alone should be a non-starter. So what they've been able to do under their past programmatic agreements, they're able to continue the destruction of our historic sites with a new programmatic agreement. And so the other thing is to note is that even with this 2008 programmatic agreement, it was used to finalize the Missile Defense Agency record of decision in record time, without any public transparency or input. And so now this 2025 programmatic agreement aims to replace that 2008 agreement. So under this 2025 draft programmatic agreement, it will cover the Missile Defense Agency and all of its undisclosed, unknown actions. So it would include any land that the military acquires under this programmatic agreement. So we don't know the full extent to the damage. So we've known what happens within DoD-controlled lands currently. We've seen the destruction of at least 24 historic sites in the live fire training range. We've seen the destruction of villages in Fanachu. And so now this destruction is going to expand beyond the footprint that we've seen. So that's what this programmatic agreement would enable the military to do. The other thing is that this draft, it's unclear how it's written. So it's unclear that so it says it's not going to apply to the existing programmatic agreement for the marine relocation, the 2011 marine relocation programmatic agreement, nor it's going to also affect the 2020 Mariana Islands and Testing and Training programmatic agreement. But it's not clear as to whether when these programmatic agreements expire, will this now supersede and be the master programmatic agreement? It's not clear how, as it is written today. So that I question that. It does use some of the elements of the 2008 programmatic agreement and provides more details. However, it's still deficient also in the fact that in the drafting process itself, the SHPO should seek interested parties. I mean, as part of the responsibility of the government representative who's going to protect our cultural resources. It is that responsibility of that position to seek interested parties to become consulting parties very early in the process of drafting a programmatic agreement. Here we are 2 weeks before the deadline to submit comments to a draft programmatic agreement. And there is no, to my knowledge, there hasn't been that participation or engagement by indigenous groups, cultural groups, to really weigh in on how to really protect our historic sites. The other thing that's very clear is that there is no, so appendices to these draft programmatic agreements or any programmatic agreements are critical. The very first Appendix A should have a listing of all lands that are included in this programmatic agreement. There is nothing attached to this programmatic agreement for the public to be fully aware of the impacts. Either it doesn't exist because they're waiting on the military to take up land, and so either it's non-existent or it's just plain not made accessible to even representative individuals like myself to see that, let alone the general public. So, it really violates, I feel, the intent of the Natural Historic Preservation Act to ensure that the public consulting parties are involved in the process of historic preservation. What's also very egregious is that they leave out in the reporting requirements, they leave out the very sensitive part, which is reporting on what is being done to the highly and moderately sensitive areas, culturally sensitive areas. That is, that was a holdover from the previous agreement. They left out a lot of reporting requirements, notification. So what this programmatic agreement does, it would delegate the responsibility to the military to assure historic preservation is carried out. And notification is not done until much later or for very specific reasons. And so we need our government representative to represent us at the very earliest part and not delegate or abdicate that authority and responsibility to the military, considering the past destruction. And
Oh, yeah.
another egregious.
Oh, no, absolutely. And before you continue, just por favor, en lenguaje question Mizu, I'm going to, while Senadora here is sharing more information on the programmatic agreement and why it's critical, I'll be posting some links into the live stream with more information. I just put like a link to the 2008 programmatic agreement. But remember, what she's saying is so critical. We've seen the destruction in the past. We've seen it happen before our eyes. And so we know, esta tatungo es una historia. And so this is, and so we're hearing it now, we should do better. And so if you have any questions, please, if you aren't sure exactly what the programmatic agreement is, or if you're not sure how to get involved, please ask. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to have a conversation about it. And so, por favor, continúa, Senadora. Go ahead and please continue.
And thank you, Miguel. So we are putting together a toolkit for the public. And we will just, please keep posted on the Instagram at senatorperez.org, I believe. So we would launch a toolkit for those that are interested in getting involved and providing comments, not only to the SHPO, but I think also the governor. We need to include the governor, who determines who the SHPO is. So the ultimate power is the governor. So the other egregious thing about this draft programmatic agreement, it could take effect with just one signatory. Currently, there's going to be two signatories, the SHPO and the military. So if the SHPO is silent, this agreement will take effect. And that, whereas if amendments are needed, then it takes all parties. So to me, that is egregious, where we're going to delegate such a document. So yeah, this draft PA has a lot of issues. And the other problem is there hasn't been a full accounting of this 2008 PA. As I stated earlier, the reporting requirements were very weak, which have been retained in this draft PA. So they leave out the critical components that need to be reported and where notification is needed, and leave it up to the military to decide these things for us, which should not be the case. So in the 2008 PA, I recently sent a FOIA regarding this. Basically what has been done to these sensitive areas, where it comes to, as far as work plans, data recovery plans, outcomes, discoveries, we have no full accounting of this. So why are we moving forward with a replacement of a 2008 programmatic agreement when we don't know what has happened with this 2008 programmatic agreement? And so we need to get a handle on this. I think it's very clear that this consultative process has fallen short, even when we speak out, even when we post our comments, we register our public comments. But if we're starting with a very deficient document, as this draft programmatic agreement proposes, then we are really setting ourselves back even further. So consultation we should not continue the status quo of consultation. I think it's critical that we advocate for consent. And how can we do this? Of course, it can be done. The Advisory Council of Historic Preservation at one time, provided an avenue on how to integrate the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples principles within historic preservation. And so I think there is a precedent for that. And I think that is something that if there should be a programmatic agreement to begin with, should reflect these values. I think without having to redo a programmatic agreement, I think what's most protective under the existing government law, US government law, is going through the Section 106 process. That is probably the most transparent process, rather than providing a blanket agreement, such as a programmatic agreement, which has also been called a problematic agreement, has been known to be called a problematic agreement. And, I think it should be withdrawn. Section 106 process should be followed. We should not blindly use these old documents to support or finalize these new military projects, especially the military defense, where we're told that there could be use of micronuclear reactors. I mean, that, we need to be very vigilant, and this process needs to be transparent and not hidden under a programmatic agreement.
Oh yeah, that I remember hearing about that. That was so, oh man, it's when it is truly frightening when you are non-self-governing and all of these plans can be made for you, and then it can be revealed to you through these sorts of documents that agencies on the other side of the world have these potential plans for you, these strategic plans, these sorts of things, and then you just learn about it because some document is filed, and oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And so we have some questions that are coming in from some viewers, and so Serena Paulino wants to know, how can the people get our island leaders to start research groups early? How can we reach and educate the broader general public about this? And so do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. What I would highly recommend is to write a letter to SHPO today. For those groups, cultural groups, indigenous groups, write a letter, send a letter today requesting to be a consulting party. And I know the timeline is very short, but if you can get that letter in and really advocate to be a part of, sit at the table of these programmatic agreements. So that's the first thing I would recommend. As far as education, my office is putting together a toolkit to help to understand. So I know, even though with this toolkit, it's very, there's a lot of jargon, which makes the information inaccessible. I mean, we're already dealing with the lack of documents within the programmatic agreement itself, right? We don't see appendices that should be there that highlight exactly what areas are going to be impacted. So that's absent. But even the jargon itself, so one of the jargon maybe I could break down to the public is the term stipulation, right? So that word is used. So stipulation basically is the terms of an agreement. And those terms are what's going to empower our government representative who's going to protect historic properties or culturally sensitive sites to hold the military accountable to historic preservation. So those stipulations are deficient from what I can tell. The more I read into this, so yeah, obviously it's going to have to take maybe several readings of this document, but the more I read, the more I see the deficiencies. And so if we don't address these deficiencies, the military has on record dismissed any concerns because it wasn't included in the programmatic agreement. And so that we need to have, in addition to demanding that this programmatic agreement be withdrawn, that if there's any attempt to create a programmatic agreement, that it is vetted by a legal consultant who has historic preservation knowledge, if that is the course. But I would also like to advocate that we go through the Section 106 process. And again, we need to demand for consent, not consultation. Consultation, even if we have the best document, the best with the strictest terms, you know, can we infuse consent in this document? I don't know. It's worth a try, but without having a document that is strong, we need to go back to the Section 106 process and not use it to finalize the Missile Defense Agency projects. That's, yeah. So very good question.
No, Sidus Masi. I think for a lot of people, the use of the word consent is, is key. Is that so many things have happened in the island historically without our consent, and that these things continue to happen, without our consent, and that commenting is not equal consent. And that if you were to take into account the amount of public comments, what the comments say, oftentimes when there are military, projects or other large-scale projects that happen on the island, the comments tend to go against, but they happen anyways. And so it is incredibly frustrating to see these sorts of things happen, but they go right down to the core, the root of the lack of sovereignty, the lack of political status. And so, but I think that's why it's so important, that you and other leaders are standing up and, insisting, that participate, make your voice be heard, comment, but also, go outside the process and tear things up, to use every available means you can. Because if the system isn't designed to empower you, then you have to find another way to create power in that. And so, we do the best that we can in a situation like this. And so, Serena says Sidzus Masi to your answer there.
Agamas.
And so you said that your office will be putting out a toolkit, correct? Later today?
Yes, and so just if you can follow the Instagram, just so you can be aware when we launch it. We're still fine tuning, I think, some details, but we should have make it easier for people to utilize and comment. Going back to consent, so perhaps I was just thinking there could be a way, right? So one of the things that is absent in many of these programmatic agreements is the ability of the local representative to terminate a programmatic agreement if there is a lot at stake as far as destruction of our resources. So that could be a potential add-on. If this programmatic agreement is used, there should be the ability of the SHPO to terminate unilaterally. So I think that's one way potential.
No,
but the opposite has happened. We're allowing one signatory to have it take effect. So that's, it's very biased towards the military's control over our resources, when we should have our representative be present there and speak up for the protection of our resources.
No, thank you for that reminder. I oftentimes forget that, and I think others do too, that, we are a colony, we are a territory, we are non-self-governing, but then because of the foreign and a domestic sense nature of our relationship, sometimes there is some power in the equation. So sometimes like a regulatory agency here on Guam will have some power to terminate an agreement or refuse to sign off on permits or something like that. They will have the ability to basically to prevent the buildup or stall the buildup or do something like that. And so I think, but it does take some courage. It does take, some leadership to
Yes.
basically say we've lost enough, we've given up too much. And so the question though is, when will those who have been in power feel like it's come to that point?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I think we're past that point. Yeah, it's very difficult to live as an indigenous person on this island and see the destruction take place within these processes. Yeah, like I said, status quo is not the option, right? Status quo of consultation and consent should be our goal if we are going to, protect what's left and even recover from the damage.
No, Sidus Masian, you you mentioned sort of the difficulty in living on Guam, existing on Guam, and one of the things that does make it difficult, of course, is the high cost of living. And one of the connecting to the issue of the military presence is, of course, military housing.
Mhm.
And so, you know, the, I think I think many people know that military housing affects the local housing market. Some people may understand it, they may not understand it, but can you provide us some updates? Because I know that you took a stand on that recently because of an incredible thing that where the military was looking to develop thousands of off-base housing, if I'm correct, right? And so, can you tell us more about that? Because if that's the case, I think that could dramatically impact, even further negatively impact the ability for indigenous and non-indigenous to exist on this island. And so, can you share more about that issue?
Yes, so according to, yeah, so basically there was a lot of talk prior about developing housing on base, right? To help mitigate the effect of the lack of housing for locals. So currently there is a critical need for housing as is without incoming military. I think the 2019 housing study stated there's a need of approximately 9,000 units for affordable living. So we lack that amount of affordable living units for civilians, the local population. With the incoming military, 15,000 plus, and their dependents and contract or workers, there is that, I guess, the pressure on this, or it's going to exacerbate this critical housing shortage for civilians because more people are vying for the same properties, potentially the same properties. And not only that, the construction has been concentrated on the base because many of the labor force, first of all, was approved. The H-2B visa worker program was approved to support the military buildup. And many contractors, other contractors, are seeking lucrative construction contracts within the footprint of the Department of Defense controlled lands, right? And so we lack this huge capacity to build for civilian homes, affordable civilian homes. And lately, there was an announcement that the military, under the Rear Admiral Brett, might have said that instead of building on base, because the estimated cost was $1.2 million per home on base, they were going to look to properties outside the base. And so the impact of that is I'm seeing people fleeing the island. People are having difficulty. They're being kicked out, or when their rental agreements have expired, we're seeing an increase of the rents up to the level of the lowest of the overseas housing allowance, which is $2,500. So what's relatively can be afforded by a family now is out of reach. So yeah, I've heard anecdotal evidence that rents have increased, let's say from 1,200 to 2,500 overnight because of this broadcast by the military, by the rear admiral, that they're seeking houses because I think it was quoted that he wanted the servicemen to live comfortably. But so the question is that so they want to look for an affordable way, and it doesn't make sense because how it's going to be affordable to the military is because they're going to displace people that are already housed rather than construct new facilities. The cheapest way for the military to get housing is to displace those that are housed outside the fence versus trying to construct new homes for their service members and dependents. And that 1.2 million, I think, needs to be questioned. Why is it 1.2 million? It doesn't make sense. They have managed to use their deep pockets to get probably the best value for a lot of their construction projects. So why can it not also transfer to building housing? And why does it have to be single family homes? Why couldn't it be multifamily dwellings, which is much more within the base? And so when we talk about consent is not optional, we even have the governor of Guam reporting before the record of decision was made on the Military Defense Agency, the governor and the lieutenant governor sent a letter requesting that the military look at the cumulative impacts on housing. And they basically dismissed it. They dismissed the leader of Guam's concerns, the highest elected leader of Guam's concerns about housing. And not only that, in the record of decision, it stated that they will, delay the incoming service members, the relocation, until they build up enough housing. And so we're already seeing the breach of their commitments, of these legal documents. These are legal documents, by the way. We're seeing the breach by the military regarding housing. And so, we talk about consultation, and I think this requires another EIS, considering the record of decision is stating one thing, but the actions are different from or the commitments that were made by the military. So again, we are not seeing effective, meaningful consultation, and therefore we need to seek and demand much greater, we need to demand consent and not have our concerns continually ignored as our people are displaced, as our environment is affected, as our historic properties are destroyed.
Again, no, that is, I think it really, it's so interesting because I think for a lot of people, they seem to understand our relationship through the United States, or actually our relationship to the United States military in Guam through the best parts, through your commissary privileges or through your photo ops. The computers or the donated to elementary schools, or the playground equipment donated, or the military guys painting the bus stops. And so that's why then when somebody says one Guam approach, or it's a partnership, working together and stuff like that, people feel it. But the military always reminds us that they're not here to work really with Guam. They have their own interests. They're not interested in collaborating with Guam on anything that really matters to them. They'll always be there for the photo op. Although they did cancel Mes Chamorro last year because of the Trump administration, but they'll always be there for the photo op. Um, but then when it comes down to anything substantive, though, they have their own interests, they have their own budgets, they've got their own mission. And really, this is something, these are issues where, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence and the gas is cheaper on the other side of the fence. There's all these issues which it really creates a stark contrast, and it's been like this for a long time. And if the military had any interest in really being a partner and working with Guam, the government, the community, the people, there could be ways of alleviating these strains. But it's not, because when you look at it, the military gets what it gets, and those who get money from the military get what they get. And the majority of the people on the island of Guam struggle as a result of it. And that's what's really, really painful about this. And this is always an issue where it just it's just it's just truly painful because when you think about when I remember when so many people, and of course, you were there in all of those military buildup days when so many people were saying that the buildup will bring so much good things to Guam. And it's it's all that economic all those economic mirages where people were like saying, oh, everyone will have so much money that even if, no one will have to worry about anything because there'll be so much money from the buildup. And people were saying ridiculous things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now when we even look at it, the more military that comes into Guam, it doesn't ever actually bring any of those economic benefits. It really normally just increases the cost of things because it exasperates the economic disparities on the island. And this is what we see more of, is the military looking at the island and seeking to take care of its own. And sure, if you join the military, then you can be part of those who are taken care of. If you don't, then get back to the other side. Get back over to the other side. And good luck. Good luck covering your rent, which probably just went up. And so I'm glad to see you and others who are trying to, do something about this, because it's not outside of the realm of possibility for the government of Guam to do something about this. There's a housing crisis across the United States, but a lot of times it's just the moneyed interests who don't want anything to do, who are benefiting from it, so they don't want to do anything about it. And here on Guam, whenever this conversation comes up, we see kind of similar things going on. But I'm glad to see, though, that because when I saw that news about the military looking to get all of this off-base housing, I was like, oh my goodness, this is gonna be insane. Because I've had that experience where landlords want to rent to military people, and so they tell you they're going to jack up your rate out of nowhere. It's a horrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
And almost everybody on Guam who doesn't own a home or doesn't have, who isn't fortunate enough to have that has gone through that. And so I don't know. So I'm glad to see you and others taking up this issue.
Mm. Yeah, if I could just add the comment about the economic growth. And so just as I think recently there was an economic forum where there was a consensus. There's an economic cliff that's going to happen. So when we talk about economic gains, it's only short term, right? Short term for a very limited few. And it's not supporting the community as a whole. So these are things that were mentioned very early on in the comment process, but was not mitigated, was not, even talked, it wasn't even addressed. And so now we're experiencing this reality, which we could have prevented. This could have been prevented. And I believe it was through your your academic comments. I remember you saying that the biggest thing that we have to offer the military is our territorial status, right? Our non-self-governing status. And it is through that that they are exploiting these gaps to militarize our island, to a large extent, to be able to build a massive military on Guam, versus if you look at the United States as other parts of the United States, you would never see a state being occupied by 30% military bases. I don't know of anything. There's no state, to my knowledge, that 30% of their lands are military bases. But yet here on Guam, they're 30% of our lands and growing because of this programmatic agreement. This draft programmatic agreement would enable the expansion beyond this 30% of what the military currently controls.
Oh, Hungan. No, Sidus Masi, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I wanted to add Senora Bobby Beneventi is tuning in and she says buenas, Sabina.
Buenas, Bobby. Thank you for tuning in.
And I did want to you mentioning sort of that the Chamber of Commerce uh reflecting on how the buildup will have that financial cliff. That was like
It was actually a Bank of Guam, I think,
the
sponsor.
Bank of Guam. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was that was so funny to me because it was like, yeah, didn't you read the draft EIS like a million years ago in 19 Forgotten? The military said that 1,000 years ago that that was going to happen. Like, who the only they I mean, it was so hysterical. Oh, the only people who said that the military buildup was going to bring endless economic growth to the island was like entrepreneurs and the business people who wanted to speculate and invest in it. The economists that were looking at it never said it. The economists who were looking at it said, it's gonna if you've got a lot of money, then you're gonna make money. If you don't have a lot of money, then you're gonna struggle. That's what the buildup is gonna do. And that's what it's done, is that like as we just saw recently, that in the past, there's more millionaires on Guam. So, but anyways, I do want to I we're almost we've got about 13, 15 minutes left. And so I do want to give us a chance to talk a little bit about deep sea mining, though, because that was something which, deep sea mining has been on the horizon. It's like a big, huge tsunami wave that is coming across the Pacific. The Trump administration, has been opening up so many, basically ignoring all sorts of environmental rules, all sorts of environmental norms. And they were doing it in American Samoa, more than 70,000 comments, almost entirely against it. In Guam, there was more than 60,000 comments, almost entirely against this. And so can you talk to us? Because you made some eloquent statements about how, deep sea mining it's it's something where there's some guys in fancy suits who are saying that this could bring economic boom to the island, but it could bring real tragedies to the island. And so can you talk to us about some of the real dangers and risks and some of the false promises that are being put out there about deep sea mining?
Yeah, so there's really a consensus within the scientific community that in addition to destroying an ecosystem that's very fragile, there are a lot of unknowns as far as how it would impact climate regulation, right? Climate change. And I guess the concern is that it could exacerbate climate change. The oceans are a huge sink of carbon dioxide, of the greenhouse gases that are driving global warming. And so if we disrupt that regulation, we don't know the Pandora's box that we're going to open in regards to climate crisis. The other thing that was very interesting to hear from Brent Tibbett, so marine biologist from the Department of Ag, many of our coral reef fishes originate from those regions where deep sea mining is going to be, or the U.S. government is planning to permit. And so it will have an impact on our coral reefs, which, provide us a lot of protections, provide us sustenance, provide us even our cultural identity. So these things are going to impact the fishes because of the amount of disruption. Like there's a estimate projection that there's going to be contamination, right? So and disruption of all these sediments that could affect the migration of fishes that are heading towards Guam, right? So it will affect our fisheries foreseeably, as well as our coral reefs. So the basic foundation of which our culture has been established, right, is being under threat. In regards to the permitting, right? So it would allow a company to undertake these, I guess, mining activities without even paying rent for 5 years. And so a company can come in, do the damage, and there is no economic benefit. Not that there's any economic benefit that outweighs the environmental, um, you know, damage, right, to this. I mean, the thing too is that these minerals, um, from what I could tell, the value of these minerals have dropped. So the expected, the speculative nature of this really, put us as at risk, not only environmentally but also economically, right? So there's no win-win situation, right? So who's going to benefit from this are the companies who are mitigated, their losses are mitigated because they don't have to pay lease for 5 years, right? And if there are minerals, they are going to, obtain those profits. And as you know, in American Samoa, the company made this condescending statement that they don't have to provide any type of monetary support to the community. And out of their good heart, they're giving 1% to those of American Samoa. So yeah, I don't see and the regulations, the construct of regulating this is deficient, even according to those that are administering or who are going to be administering this type of activity. There's a huge lack of any kind of regulatory safeguards. And to top it off, there is no consent by the community where this is happening. So when we talk about lack of clout, political say, having a seat at the table, here is another instance with, again, huge impacts, not only to the local communities, but even globally, I would contend. And so we know that when our voices are silenced, when our voices are ignored, we see what happens. We see the reality of these things coming, manifesting itself, as we've seen with our island.
Oh, Hungan, this is one that, oh my goodness, and this is one that doesn't only, it's affecting the entire Marianas, and it was beautiful to see kind of the Marianas come together in something like this too, where we saw leaders across the Marianas, activists across the Marianas, and in the diaspora, kind of all uniting in opposition to this because, you know, and in contrast to how we see in the United States right now, trillions of dollars being dumped into AI and so much water being wasted on data centers. It was beautiful to see so many people here in the Marianas saying, no, protect water, protect our waters, please, to see people walking for water, to see us saying, like, let's protect what we have instead. It is truly, it's just a reminder that well, the world should listen to indigenous communities. The world should listen to indigenous people. Um, the world should stop making AI crap. First of all, definitely stop making a lot of that weird AI crap. And the world should listen to indigenous people because this is definitely a good example of that. Um, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on that. What was it like to see some of the responses from across the Marianas and across the world? Because I was filled with some hope. I mean, it's easy to feel hopeless when you're kind of non-self-governing, when you are, as a famous U.S. Air Force captain said in the 90s, when we are just a cup in the hands of the United States and they can do what they will with us. But I did feel some hope, at least, to see so many voices, including some that are sometimes divided, unite in opposition to this. And so, how did you feel?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's also when we're talking about these issues, it's very, very, disturbing and it could seem hopeless. But yes, it's important. I was very important to see how united we were across islands, different levels of government, as well as our allies. And so, yes, that definitely brings hope, and I definitely want to ensure that we need to continue this work, right? And yeah, we just have to make sure that we continue in all different levels, whether it's advocacy at Congress, the congressional level, here at home, also even potential legal action, if that's going to be required. So I think we need to use everything within what we can do to prevent this from happening. Um, yeah, I think that's the most critical thing. And in regards to what's happening with this draft PA, I do have hope that we can do something about this. And I do want to encourage many of your listeners to follow my Instagram for a toolkit. We'll have that out shortly. The timeline, the deadline is looming. February 18th is the deadline, but if you can get your comments in sooner, that would be very helpful, not only to the SHPO, but also to the governor. I think would be very helpful, instrumental in preventing this harm from happening. Um, yes, and I know that day is also another day where there's a public hearing in regards to a very contentious bill, Bill 242. So it's a very critical that people get a head start on on this particular issue.
Yes, Hungen. And I just posted on the live stream the Senadora's website, and so you can find more information there. And we had a few more comments that came in, and so Jordine Uggan Sumaska Gidza Aotearoa, she wants to say most in Aotearoa, New Zealand also oppose deep sea mining and other rare earth minerals mining and extraction here, despite the current prime minister entertaining talks with the Trump administration. And so she wants to add in some comments from the other end of Oceania. Sidus Masi Jordine.
Thank you as well.
And so, no, Hungen. And so, Senadora, we are just about out of time. And so I wanted to give you a final chance here to share anything else, any other final messages, especially because, I think we did have a few messages of people expressing support. There was a few messages that people sent of people kind of saying, what can we really do? Because it does seem a mixture of there's things happening. Maulek esti sinetatsogwi esti, but also hafa sinetatsogwi para hafa esti. We can't really do anything. And so do you have a message of kind of that you want to offer sort of as a final message before we end the episode?
Yes, thank you. We do have power with this particular document. So I really want to encourage all your listeners to send in comments before the deadline happens, which is February 18th. Please follow my Instagram. It's Instagram at Senator Perez I guess, receive this toolkit. This will have very practical ways to address this. And I think the more of those, just like the deep sea mining, we can have an effect. We have more of an influence here on Guam when it comes to programmatic agreements. And I do want to encourage as many comments to really withdraw this draft programmatic agreement, which will enable further land acquisitions, possibly, well, it will further will reduce the amount of transparency and accountability that the military has in historic preservation and protection of our cultural sites. We should be at the table, and you have the power to make change here, especially with these documents. And I encourage everybody to send in comments to the SHPO as well as to the governor.
Si Zeus Masi Senadora, si Zeus Masi Patorui Bidadamo, si Zeus Masi Perifinetotmo, Palestina episode Fanachu. Za si Zeus Masi para hamzu todos, ni umeega zanu me ekungok ajos, este ki I otribiai esta.
Masi.